I always cringe inside when people say Pyro is the best damage dealing element in Genshin Impact when it's clearly Cryo. So yeah, let's talk about Pyro. So Pyro's main gimmick is that it has Melt and Vaporize, which amplifies the damage of the hit that causes the reaction. So, of course, I'm not going to be talking about how much it amplifies because I assume you already know it, and if you don't know it, it's not just go look up a wiki page for it. It's not complicated. So, one of the main problems that Pyro has is that it's a very reaction reliant element where if you're not melting or vaporizing, you're not dealing damage. You're not gonna deal damage because most of their ratios are meant to take into account melting or vaporizing. So you have characters whose ratios are basically a portion has been cut out of it compared to other, say, cryo or electro characters. And another problem is that if you want to melt or vaporize, you need as much application as you can get. So Singcho, Kokomi, I don't know who else for cryo, but yeah, pyro characters tend to be glued to characters that can deal hydro and cryo by a lot. And that pretty much limits your team comps. And not only that, even if you've got a ton of hydro or cryo application, you run into the problem of ICD where you can't react with all of your attacks as a pyro character. So, okay, well, what about pyro characters? Surely there are top tier pyro characters in Genshin Impact, I hear you say. Well, not really. Bennett and Shangling are pretty much the only top tiers that are pyro in Genshin Impact. And they're not even top tier because they're pyro. They're top tier for other reasons. Bennett is a top tier because his attack buff is so universal that as long as the character utilizes their attack stat to deal damage, Bennett can buff them. And his buff is enormous. With a good weapon and a good talent level, he can buff up to 800 attack, which is pretty insane. Shangling bypasses the problems of pyro characters, which is ICD. How about reacting with every hit of Pyronado and Guoba? Her attacks literally do not have ICD. So, yeah, I love hitting 50k Pyronados with like multiple enemies and like, I don't know, overloading them too for more damage. Shangling also snapshots, which means if you have a Bennett buff, you can maintain the Bennett buff on Pyronado for the entirety of Pyronado's duration. The closest good character, like, that's not Shangling and Bennett, that's Pyro, is Hu Tao. But as I've mentioned before, Hu Tao's so mid. Like, I love being worse than Shangling without Homa. uh, but yeah, Pyro doesn't have good characters. Yoimiya's awful. Klee's awful. Toma's garbage. Amber's garbage. Shinyan's garbage. There's probably more, but I can't remember because all of them, the rest of them outside of Bennett and Shangling are forgettable and not even good. So why did I say Cryo's the best element in the game? Well, because you have bangers like Ayaka, who's the god of speedrunning. Ganyu, who can double melt her arrows. Shenhe, who can buff cryo characters. And Blizzard Strayer and Cryo Resonance. So with Blizzard Strayer and Cryo Resonance, you get free crit rate. And including the character's base 5% crit rate, you essentially get 60% free crit rate without any investment. And that's insane. You can just start stacking other buffs like energy recharge or attack percent to truly and crit damage because you're not investing in crit rate to just skyrocket your damage. You have Shenhe who literally makes Kokomi viable because Shenhe buffs so much you can have the damage loss of Mona to Kokomi with Kokomi's superior Hydro application and healing. And you have Ayaka who's incredibly good at freeze, and because Blizzard Share increases your crit rate when you freeze, yeah. You just crit, you freeze your enemies, boom. And then you have Ganyu, considered to be also one of the best characters for speedrunning the game, just because her aimed shot hits as hard as some elemental bursts. And considering that her charge attacks don't have ICD, I love melting multiple enemies in a Venti ult. And yeah, you have Cryo is so incredibly gassed to the point of absurdity. Like Pyro looks like a bottom tier compared to Cryo. And not only that, you have actually good characters like Diano who shields, who heals, who batteries. And you also have Rosaria who can generate a good amount of energy and boost crit rate if you want even more crit rate, for God's sake. Like, and Cryo doesn't really require elemental reactions to deal damage. At most, they only need to freeze. And with freeze, you can just constantly reapply it with someone like Ayaka who hits so much with her ult that she can pretty much just bypass ICD. And you have Ganyu who doesn't have ICD on her aimed shots, so she'll pretty much react with each and every one of her hits. Or sorry, charge shots and arrows. So when you see that Cryo has literally everything, what does Pyro have? Melt? Vaporize? Freeze immobilizes enemies that are affected by frozen, and with Blizzard Share you increase your crit rate by 60%, which I would argue is way better than Melt or Vaporize. Characters? Yeah, sure, like Hu Tao can compare to Ayaka, or Yoimiya can compare to Ganyu, or that Diano can be compared to Toma. Like Pyro has nothing. Pyro has absolutely nothing in comparison to Cryo. I mean, yeah. Yeah. With all said and done, I believe that people think highly of Pyro just because of the damage per screenshot. And it's very satisfying to look at a Hu Tao Q that deals 200 to 300k damage versus an Ayaka Q that deals 25k per tick on her burst. That's kind of just a fact. I mean, some people think Eula's a good character just because she can deal 200, 300k with her Q, when in reality, physical's not that great. Yeah. Like, Beto Taser is one of the most broken teams I've used, and that's just using Electrocharge as a main reaction with Beto, Sucrose, Fischl, and Xingqiu. Like, people glorify bigger numbers rather than more smaller numbers. Another example is literally the clam set. Like, people are like, oh, use Kokomi for clam set or use Chi Chi for clam set and you deal like 30k per like few seconds, and it's like, bruh, you're literally better off using tenacity to mill it and buffing your team that way. Like, bruh. And yeah, the whole Pyro is the best element in the game for dealing damage. I'm pretty sure it's from the casuals, and I mean this with no negative intent, but realistically, that's the way it is. Okay, normal person on Reddit goes into r/Genshin Impact, sees a Hu Tao that does 500k Q. Oh, Hu Tao good. And yeah, I mean, I absolutely do not mean any negative intent with that, but that's just the way things are. And so, yeah, if you've made it this far, thanks and bye.